At the amount of the expenditures, we think that's a little bit high. We're narrowing the bill, the 16 beds or less to licenses of 804. I was not aware that there were so many licenses for assisted living facilities. So it's going to redefine the number of beds in the facilities we're referring to.
Representative Edwards?
Edwards, yes, sir. I just want to make sure I'm reading what you're talking about. The only piece of paper I have on 527 in front of me is marked 0522. It sounds to me like you have an amendment available to you that's got a more complete fiscal note on it. And so if you have a different document we should be looking at it, I'd like to.
We just asked for the amendment. I'm not going to have it available for about another 45 minutes. But the intent of the amendment is to simply replace the content here.
Thank you for the clarification.
Okay, so rather than confuse everybody with the changes and the content of this, if you would be so kind, Mr. Chairman, and allow Mr. Campbell to come up and explain what the facility consists of and how the license impacts the amount that's being asked for. So the content is good. We're talking 16 beds or less. The amount is 115 or 16 a day for Medicaid patients. And he's got all the details of the numbers. So if you would allow him, I will turn this over to him.
Questions from any of the committee members? Obviously, we have an amendment we have to look at later, and that'll happen in Division 3.
I apologize for that.
Thank you. So you said the next person to be expert is Ann Campbell. We'll invite her to come forward. Welcome to Finance.
Hit the red light.
Maybe a little unorthodox. I'm the Honorable Packy Campbell. I think you remember me from Farmington. This is my sister, Ann, and I was wondering if we could just do our testimony together.
Yes, give us your name and we'll add it to the pink card.
I got it.
He's got it. Thank you.
Representative Petrie, my real secret name is Wayne. It's Wayne Packy Campbell. So now the secret is out. But I had the opportunity to serve in the New Hampshire legislature with the chairman, Weiler, and we had a lot
Been
of
so
fun.
long, I don't recognize you.
I do recognize you, and it was 20 years ago, and you haven't changed a bit. Congratulations.
I'm trying to follow my mother's lead. She looked the same at 100 as she did at 70.
I won't ask whether you were 70 then or 70 now.
In between.
I got to get this button thing down. Hit it once. I'm good. Okay, so my name is Wayne Packy Campbell, and my sister Ann and I started a assisted living facility. And I think that's the first thing that we'll explain is it's licensed. That's a 504 license, and we have a copy of that license. So when I asked Representative Horgan and Representative Petrie if they would sponsor this legislation, we put in assisted living facility up to 16 beds. And that has a very important import. That means an 804 license. In the methodology from Health and Human Services, I think there was a little miscommunication in that they included all licensed facilities. And that was not the intent of the legislation. So as a former legislator, I agree that there's some clarity that's perhaps warranted. And that would be that instead of saying an assisted living facility up to 16 beds, we would just say assisted living facility with an 804 residential care license. And what that does is really narrow the scope of what we're talking about today. And I don't mean to put Health and Human Services on the spot, and I wish I had let them know ahead of time. But I would hope that in Division 3 or later, when you look at that amendment, they could give you an updated fiscal note that would address the limited number of beds in the state of New Hampshire. And quite honestly, I don't know how many there are, but I know that the 805 license which is more of a continuum of care license, more nursing care, a higher level of in-room services, for lack of a better term. It's different. But nonetheless, an 804 facility, as an assisted living facility, as a residential care facility, provides even more services, in my opinion, than an 805. And what I mean is, and my sister will speak to this a little bit more, is they take you to the hairdresser. They take you to activities. You're getting assistance with your living. You're getting med management. So all the staff are med certified. You have one RN instead of necessarily RNs going in and giving the service at the same time. But you really have, in my opinion, a higher level of service. So again, the 804 clarification is important because one of the notes in the fiscal note is that, oh, we don't know how to pay different rates to different facilities. When in fact, when you look at the fiscal note, they pay $58 a night for some facilities, 804s, and they pay $95 a night, I'm assuming, for 805s or other facilities. So there is a precedent that you would pay facilities at different rates. And I'm asking you to do that for a couple of reasons. One, I'm partners with my three sisters. So anybody who votes against this, they're voting against my sisters. That's not a good idea. So when we opened this facility, it was right when COVID hit. It took over a year to get the approval. And I will tell you, there was a substantial amount of confusion on the requirements. And just for a visual aid, Mr. Chairman, in this packet, you have 804 license administrative rules, different than 805 license administrative rules. Definitionally, they're very similar. Requirements are very similar. Just to give you one example, 805 is NFP 101, where 804 is a different fire life safety code, a little bit less. So there's lots of little nuances like that. I don't want to get into it. I just want to make the point that they are different levels of, almost like a private school versus a public school, just a different set of rules, but they're both licensed schools. Different set of rules. They're both licensed care facilities. One is specifically an assisted living facility, and that's what this bill is about. That right now, for a small facility to exist in New Hampshire, if you get paid the Medicare rate, it's just not enough because you don't know what you're going to get in matching Social Security funds or matching funds from their retirement if they had one. And this bill not only will help this very limited number of facilities, but I want to point out it's really going to help patients in the facility. If you end up, and I look around this room, no reference to the earlier comments, but if you're nearing that time frame where you might be in an assisted living facility, you might want to support this bill. Because what this bill would do is, if you're not quite out of, you're still driving maybe, you can still self-shower. There's rules that you have to be able to do to be in one of these facilities. So if you're in that situation, you can only keep $72 a month. So if it costs $4,500 a month to be in one of these facilities, one of the cheapest rates in the state, and your Social Security is only $700, that's not going to even be the average. It's not going to get you to $4,500. It's not even going to get you close with the current rate of $59 a month. Matter of fact, if you increase the rate to $115 a day, it only gets you to $3,200 from the Medicare reimbursement rate. And then you're still going to probably have to pay, on average, it's about $800. And when they accept a client, they don't get to know what their Social Security is. They don't get to know what their retirement money may or may not be. So here they have these people in desperate need that a lot of times are homeless. This bill will address head on the elderly homelessness population in a very positive way by providing beds for these people that are high functioning enough that they can almost take care of themselves, but not quite. And when they're faced with the decision of moving into a facility and know that the only funds they're going to have available to them is $72 a month, that's a problem. So if you increase it to $115, someone who's making more than $1,000 a month in their retirement, or more than $1,000 a month in their Social Security, or whatever those different levels of income is, they'd be able to keep that money over the $1,000, not just the $72. So this bill is important not just for the facilities, but for this population. Try living on $72 a month. I know I'm happy that my mother is a client in this facility. And I'm probably not supposed to say, and I give her $200, I give her money because she can't live on $72 a month. And if she didn't have me as her son, that's what the state requires her to do. So that's one of the biggest problems is I want to help these individuals. I want to make sure that if you understand, if you're a person who doesn't have a payee, and we made the mistake early on, we accepted some clients who didn't have a state payee. If you don't have a state payee and someone's getting $1,000 a month and they're being told they got to give you $918 of that money, good luck. I mean, desperate people do desperate things. So then all of a sudden, all we're getting is this reduced Medicare rate, and we have a 72-year-old borderline homeless person in our facility paying a third of the money they should be paying. It's a problem, and it will bankrupt these smaller facilities. And I would say to you that the data I'd like you to look at is what were the 804 licensed facilities post-COVID, what are the 804 licensed facility after COVID. Representative Petrie from Farmington, Horgan from Farmington, we have a place called Hattie's Place that was demolished, turned back on. They were trying to get an 804 license 3 years ago when we were trying to get the 804 license. And the state repeatedly wanted them to be to an assisted care license criteria, to the 805 or that. And they claimed it was a miscommunication. I would boldly say that the state would rather have continuum of care facilities. And that's fine if that's their policy, change the law. Right now, the law is licensed for 804 facilities, and they serve a vital and important role for assisted living. And there's a lot of people that will be in that level of care for a long period of time. The public policy problem is when they transition to a nursing home, there's a transition that has to happen. That's a negative. I can't disagree with that. If you're in a facility that does every level of care, you can stay in that facility, but you're really not. You're moving to a different section or you're moving to a different thing. And my last point that I'll make is that this bill favors small businesses, entrepreneurs like us from New Hampshire. It supports the North Country. It supports entrepreneurs opening up small businesses. And instead, we have higher levels of pay for facilities that are owned by hedge funds or large companies. And I think in New Hampshire, being a small state with a lot of small businesses being the backbone of our economy and our employment, whenever, and I know this is a fiscal committee, but whenever there's an opportunity to fiscally support small businesses, we should lean heavily in that direction because it's very important that we have more of these small businesses because I hope, as my sister will tell you briefly, I know I talk too much, I'm sorry, that we are able to provide a level of care that you're not going to get in a 100-bed facility. We're able to provide a level of care that it's her, my sister Elaine in the kitchen, my sister Sharon, who's an RN, and my mom doing activities while she's living there. It's a wonderful facility. And when we looked at all the facilities of buying an existing location, I saw a lot of family-run small businesses that these people were connected in the lives of their clients. And and quite frankly, I'm being asked to subsidize 11 people in Charlestown, New Hampshire. And I do that because one of them is my mother. But if we don't have a fiscally reasonable payment plan, $58 isn't it. $115 is a reasonable plan where maybe the people get to keep a little bit of their money. Maybe we can have a profitable business model, and maybe we can, not continue to go into debt, but to pay down debt. And with that, I'll let my sister answer any questions that you might have about the day-to-days of the facility and how important this would be to improve the lives of our clients there.
I think I kept track between what you were talking about, monthly payments and daily payments, but you seem to use monthly for all of them, but
I
think
have
know
it all
what-
written out and have turned a copy over to your LBA staff.
Very good. Questions from the committee members? Representative Edwards.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. For the sake of the question, just assume that everything you said sounds good to me. This is strictly a process question. Do you have somebody working for DHHS, like for Henry Lipman or somebody? We're less than 1 week away from having the budget provided to us to start working on. And this is one issue of multiple issues that we have to deal with in Medicaid. And so rather than dealing with this as a separate bill, I'm just asking you if you have support in the department to where we could just roll this into our budget process and take a look at all of the moving parts and not just one piece at a time.
I hope that I have support of the department. I think it's a good idea, and I think they should support
But do you
it.
know? I'm
I
not
do not
talking
know.
about hope.
Unfortunately, not being connected in here every day like you are, I do not have a relationship with DHS, and I don't know what their position is on the bill. But I'd be happy to meet with them, get back to you before the work session. And I'd also, just to answer what I think is your question, Representative Edwards, if you want to handle this as part of the budget and not as a separate bill, and I know that this committee is going to look at those rate pays for 804 and put it in the budget, However we skin the cat, I'm fine with that. As long as we accomplish getting 804 facilities a reasonable pay, $58 isn't it? So if you want to put that in the budget, I would welcome that. I don't think that we need a separate bill. I just think we need to accomplish the additional payment level.
Thank you for the answer. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Representative Earth for a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for coming in. Two quick questions. Do you have any idea how many 804 facilities there are in the state and how many total beds they contain?
Actually, what I know is that 7 have closed in the last couple of years. Those were all small businesses: Hattie's Place, Horseshoe Pines, Freedom Manor. It's been a steady roll of places not being able to make it financially, between trying to pay their staff a living wage. We raised our wage to $15 an hour in November of 21, and thanks to a state grant, we're able to maintain that throughout this year and give our employees a small, Christmas bonus that they really appreciated. But $15 an hour in Sullivan County doesn't get you an apartment on your own. If they're not a 2-income family in New Hampshire, they have a problem with housing. We have lost people to South Carolina because of the housing rates in here and the wage situation. So we really, really need to be able to increase our wages, increase our staff. Right now, we're running at 9 beds because adding 2 more people in, which we'd love to do, puts us at a staffing level that we can't support. The $115 an hour would allow us to add 2 more Medicaid beds, would allow us to add staff to supply that support. We do have people that, as Packy mentioned, shower independently, still drive their cars. But we also have people that are full help. They don't get their socks on by themselves. We use both the underserved senior adult population and we have mental health members in our facility. We used the program that the state ran 2 years ago for moving elderly patients from New Hampshire Hospital and Glencliff into appropriate assisted living population homes so that they could have the least restrictive environment. One of them, it's worked out beautifully. Another one, not so much. But we're struggling along with her, and that bonus that was given to us and the pay rate that was given to us for that year were both godsends. That program did a great support for us. It's over now, and we're back to trying to live on our budget, and 58.66 a day is a budget number that is really difficult to support. It is $74, by the way, that they get to keep, but that's not enough to buy our one smoker a carton of cigarettes on any given month. We end up supplementing his smoking habit, but, we like to keep him happy. Oops.
I
He only
don't think we
smokes
just
outside.
did. We just testify we encourage smoking in the elderly population.
Yeah. He's been smoking for 60 years. 60 years. The chances of our breaking it aren't good. We do get him routine chest x-rays and make sure he's not doing any damage. So far, so good. He'll be 80 in a year. It's not a point that we're going to take away from him at this point. Because we're a small facility, we can individualize. The person that likes to go to museums can go to museums. The people that like to go to the animal farm can go to the animal farm. We want to support their individual growth, their activities of daily living, and their enjoyment of life.
Excellent. Representative Byrne, I'll take a crack at answering your question. I did go over with Representative Horgan to legislative research, and I asked them specifically how many 804 facilities we have, how many beds we have in it, and I asked them how many 805 facilities we had and how many beds we had in it, so the committee would be able to see the difference in the type of facilities that are out there. But I think Ann did an excellent job of saying we know of 7 facilities that have closed as a result of the disparity in the payment system from the state. And if they're getting $95 a day, I think we should get $20 more because we provide more services.
Do you have that number?
Yeah, research has not provided that to me yet, but I think we can have it by your work session this afternoon.
Thank you.
Follow up from Representative Earth. Representative, excuse me, Popovici Mueller.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for taking the question. I heard your testimony that basically the low reimbursement rate is a continuous financial challenge, but you mentioned a lot of closings during the last couple of years, and we are all very aware of the huge impact that was added by COVID and all those challenges. Can you get us an idea of were those businesses that may have been maybe barely viable without COVID and COVID put them under? Or is this, have you seen stuff like this happening before COVID hit? I just need to, understand a little bit how to separate those two, if you can offer any information to that. I know it's a complicated question.
It is complicated, and COVID hasn't helped because it has decreased our available staffing. And that has been an ongoing problem for all 804s because they make less money, they pay less wages. But COVID wasn't necessarily the death knell of any of those places. Aging out and not having people to take over the business, the ownership aging out. These were all small family-run operations, privately owned. They weren't conglomerates like some of the other places, some of the larger places are. They were small business owners, and without the support of the state, they were running on too thin an edge to survive COVID. And at the $58.66 point mark, it's incredible. I mean, we are one of the more reasonably priced assisted livings in the area, as told to me by members that have been looking for housing. We do take patients with challenges that are slightly beyond 804 level of care only because we have staff capable of supporting those members with their mental health needs. We do a lot of transportation, and most places don't. They use the transportation service companies, which our members aren't capable of doing on their own. I mean, it's like putting your mother in a taxi cab to Boston. You wouldn't do that.
Definitely not. My late mother was in Romania. But no, seriously, I really want to thank you for a very insightful answer and for sharing your perspective. I find it very valuable because, I'm a freshman. I'm learning a lot. So thank you for contributing to that. Thanks.
Further questions? Representatives,
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Stringham.
Representative Stringham. I want to make sure I understand your bill as amended. As revised, the special rate would apply only to 804 registered and also be restricted to those who have a greater than 50% Medicaid occupancy. So in your case, if you have I think 11 beds in your facility, if 5 or fewer of them were Medicaid, as proposed, it would revert to the existing rate. And just to kind of get an idea, if instead of providing this in terms of an increased per diem rate, if it was just a straight grant, if you're looking at 6 people a day for a year and an extra $60, it's about $150,000 a year for your one facility. Do those numbers, are they in line with kind of what you're here asking for today?
Yes, sir. The 50% mark is to try and encourage additional Medicaid bed rates because right now, the Medicaid bed rate of some of the privately owned facilities can be anywhere from 10% to 0. They have a choice. They don't have to take, especially private facilities, don't have to take a Medicaid bed rate if they don't have a bed available at the time. And I want to encourage those kind of places, the 804 section of a larger continuum home per se, to take that 50% of Medicaid bed rates just to get some of the seniors that are living in homeless shelters. That comes always automatically to mind because we're taking someone from a homeless shelter this week. Because the encouragement of and the opportunity for small business owners to open more of these facilities is there and is viable at $115 a night.
I'd like to take a crack at answering that. That is definitely the original intent of the bill, was that you'd have this critical level. I would submit to the committee that if you're going to look at the amendment that we're writing, I did simplify it to just be an 804 facility. The original reason I said 50% is because these bigger facilities can have 1 or 2 Medicare beds. And I didn't know if there was a requirement for them to do that. And they're able to average that lower cost out over 100 beds. So originally the 50% was the idea that if you're a small facility, it's kind of like if you're a private care facility and you're charging $9,000 a month, it's just a different facility that's charging $4,500 a month. It's just a different type of arrangement, and that social economic payment class usually doesn't mix. But I would say to you that if you're going to narrow it with the amendment, I believe the bill only addressed 804 facilities because it said assisted living facilities up to 16 beds, which is definitionally what an 804 facility is. So I don't think there's any change in what the intent or what we filed. It just makes it clarify that it's an 804. And in the amendment, the way we drafted it, it left out the 50% stuff. And again, we live in this fluid world. So it's like, what's better, the 50% criteria, or if you pay 804 facilities that accept a Medicare bed, and they said, well, I wasn't going to accept any, but if I get this right, I'll accept 1 or 2 or 3. I would say to you that that might be better than the 50% criteria. I don't know which would drive up more beds. And I would say to you that if you limit it to 804, it eliminates the huge fiscal impact. And I would submit to you that if you pass this bill, that the fiscal impact is so minor, it's not going to throw off the whole state budget or perhaps even be anything that we'd have to really consider as a big issue in the budget, because it's limited to the 804. And then if it's limited to whether it's 1 bed or 50% of the beds, it wouldn't make a big difference. But to answer your question, 5 beds a year, I think that 150 number sounds about right to what the impact would be on an individual facility that had 6 Medicare beds. And that's the difference between us, losing 50 grand a year and maybe, for the 4 partners, oh my gosh, they might make 20 grand for the economic risk and what we did. This is not, it is a money-making proposition, and I believe in the for-profit business, but my sisters are saints. They're saints with what they do every day. I was a landlord for 25 years. I can't imagine the level of care that they're giving these individuals. And I mean, to go up there and have a drunk 72-year-old man assaulting your sister and having to deal with that, they deserve this $115 a day.
We would also like to mention that my brother, God bless him, is using Medicare and Medicaid interchangeably. This is a Medicaid bill. Medicare does not cover 804 facilities in any way, shape, or form. Our clients do have Medicare to pay for their doctor bills. The majority of them have Medicaid to cover the cost that Medicare doesn't cover, but Medicare will not pay for 804. But it's interchangeable.
That's why she's my older sister.
Further questions from committee members? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony.
Thank you very much.
Good to see you again.
Good to
Maybe
see
next
you.
time
And
I'll
that-
represent.
That amendment should be automatically sent to the committee from Legislative Services. So you should see that sometime today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, I'll next call on Gary R. Cannon, NHARCH, which he will tell us what that stands for.
It's Gary Cahoon, and NHARCH is the, okay, the New Hampshire Association of Residential Care Homes, which is the statewide organization for residential care and assisted living homes.
Okay.
And I'm sorry, I'd like Alex Katrubis to join me, if I may, have him do that.
All right, we've got
and-
cards on both of you, that's fine.
Okay. Alex is New Hampshire Arch's lobbyist.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. I'm handing out a list of all of the 804 and 805 facilities, which is a question that's come up. We are here in support of the bill. However, we were not consulted or involved with the drafting. We represent New Hampshire Arch, which is the assisted living care facility association in the state. I did reach out to the sponsor to try and coordinate. I wasn't terribly successful. But right now there are, as you can see on the final page of the spreadsheet that Mr. Ripple is handing out, currently there's 6,534 licensed beds for assisted living in the state of New Hampshire. 34. That comes, it's right on the Department of Health and Human Services website. We don't have to go to House Research. It's right there on the web for everyone to see. Of those 34 beds, only 500 of them are Medicaid beds. And that information comes from the department dashboard that's presented to the fiscal committee generally every fiscal committee meeting. So 6,500 total beds, 500 are Medicaid beds eligible for reimbursement under the CFI program. I know that you're really behind on the timing here. So Mr. Cahoon is a former owner-operator of Friendship Manor in New Ipswich. He's an expert on assisted living and the CFI program. He has decades of experience. So I'm just going to suspend, thank the sponsor for bringing it forward. But again, we didn't have anything to do with the drafting or the coordination. And I think that might have solved some of the issues that you've talked about this morning. And I just want to finally say that I completely agree with Representative Edwards. We need to look at all of the Medicaid rates. We have issues with DD, substance abuse, mental health. All of the Medicaid rates need to be looked at in this budget, not just assisted living, nursing homes. All of the providers are under an immense healthcare workforce crisis, Meals on Wheels. I could go on. So we need to look at it in the budget process. So whether you retain this bill, however you want to go about it procedurally, but we need to look at all the Medicaid rates going forward. So I'll turn it over to Mr. Cahoon. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you
Yes.
for the data.
You're welcome.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to address you on House Bill 527. My wife and I owned Friendship Manor in New Ipswich, New Hampshire for 37 years. We closed in May of 2022, largely for workforce issues. Okay, to the extent that workforce issues were caused by COVID, I suppose COVID might have been a factor. But really it was workforce. We simply could not hire enough people to keep going. Obviously, part of a workforce solution would be an increased rate, allowing us to pay a higher rate of pay to our employees. It is, I will admit, it is only part of the solution. There are other demographic reasons that the workforce is in trouble, but certainly making rates higher would help. Before I continue, I did hand out some written testimony. There is a typo in it. In the last paragraph, I talk about the cost of building new facilities, and it says upwards of $10 million. That actually should be $40 million. So that's a big typo, yes. All right. Anyway, there's no question that an increase in rates is needed, and essentially for two reasons. The first is that there's a tremendous unmet need. And the second reason would be to save money through cost avoidance. With regard to the unmet need, many of you may be aware that the CFI budget, if you look at that closely, is somewhat misleading. Year after year, CFI does not expend all the monies appropriated to it. And year after year, they don't fill all the authorized slots for clients that are authorized by agreement with the federal government. This leads some people to conclude that the CFI need is therefore being met. That is not the case. The reason they can't expend the funds and fill the slots is that the reimbursement rates are so low that many providers refuse to participate in the program. Now, CFI is the overall umbrella that covers, it's actually the waiver that covers residential care. With residential care, the situation is actually a little bit more complicated. It's difficult to determine what the unmet need in residential care is compared to the whole CFI program. With the CFI program, we know how many units of service were authorized to fill the slots that are open, but we don't know how many units, and we do know how many units were actually provided. So the gap between those two is at least one indication of what the unmet need might be. Unfortunately, in residential care isn't authorized for a client until the client finds a bed. And it's almost impossible to find a bed. What appears to be the case, if you look at the numbers, is that virtually 100% of the approved need for residential care services is met, but that's because of this technical way in which it's figured. Friendship Manor was an 804 home. Just to correct one thing that was said before, we were not a 16-bed home. We had 22 beds. 804 homes are not limited to 16 beds. Many of the 804 homes were sheltered care homes in the past, and the sheltered care homes were limited to 25 beds. But there were, in fact, shelter care homes that were 100 beds. Now, as to cost avoidance, when Friendship Manor closed, we were down to 18 residents. We had not admitted residents for a couple of months because we knew we might be closing. So instead of the 20 or 21 residents we normally had, we had 18. Of those 18, 11 were moved to nursing homes. Of those 11, only one of them actually needed a nursing home bed. The other 10 went to nursing homes simply because we couldn't find a CFI res care bed. In addition, there were 7 residents who went to CFI beds. There are 2 problems with this. The first is that the state and counties are spending much more for a nursing home bed than they would be for a CFI bed. And secondly, this means that at least 10 people were denied access to a nursing home bed who badly needed one. So these are the reasons, in a very brief synopsis, why the rates have to increase. There was a question about the number of homes that had closed. Obviously, Friendship Manor was one of those. And Representative Mueller asked if homes were closing before the COVID epidemic. And in fact, there were. I testified in the budget hearings in 2018 about the closure of actually 3 homes just before that budget process. The Gaffney home in Rochester, which had been in business since 1902, and the Carpenter home in Swansea, which was a town-owned home and had been in business since 1937, I believe. And the biggest reason that homes were closing then and that they're closing now is workforce. Homes, for the most part, have not been able to hire sufficient staff, and that was certainly true of Friendship Manor. In terms of limiting the increase to 804 homes, I would submit that doesn't really make a lot of sense. There are, in the list that Alex has handed out, 136 licensed homes. Of those 136 licensed homes, only 53 are enrolled as Medicaid CFI providers. I'm not sure how many of those 53 are actually providing services. Less than 53, I can tell you that. I know that a few years ago, this number was over 80. And when there were 80 enrolled providers, about 40 were actively providing services. So the 53 homes account for all of the 500 beds that are currently occupied, but it's a relatively small portion of those homes that are probably accounting for most of them. Of the 53 homes, and again, this statistic had to do with the original version of the bill,
Excuse me a
only
minute.
12.
Are they the ones that are shaded?
Shaded is the Medicaid homes, homes that accept CFI Medicaid.
Okay.
I guess
Okay.
those are the 53 then. Thank you.
There are 53 shaded, that's right. Okay. So it doesn't really make sense if it's in the public interest and it's good public policy to increase the utilization of CFI beds, and I believe strongly that that is the case. Limiting it to a very small number of the providers doesn't really make a lot of sense. I also would submit that the 50% required participation doesn't make sense. Of the 6,534 licensed beds in the state, 5,192 are in facilities of 50 beds or greater. Most of those larger facilities are new facilities and been built within the last 10 years or so. And as I said, there was a typo in there. I talked about a cost of up to $10 million. That was a mistake. It's actually up to $40 million. The majority of those homes, if they were 50% Medicaid, anything like the current Medicaid rate would go bankrupt within a matter of 6 months to a year. The larger, newer homes simply cannot participate fully, as it were, in the Medicaid program. But what they can do, and which many of them would be willing to do, is to continue providing services for people who were there but have run out of money. Mrs. Jones moved into Happy Valley Assisted Living 6 years ago with a couple $100,000 in the bank. She has now spent that money. And right now, unless the home is willing to basically give her a free ride, she's probably going to be asked to go to a nursing home. which again might be a very poor utilization of a nursing home bed. The homes would like to be able to allow Mrs. Jones to continue, but they need a somewhat higher rate of pay, actually a considerably higher rate of pay, to do so. They also need some statutory and regulatory changes, but that's for another time. The last thing I guess I would say is I had a conversation yesterday with a lady who is the largest CFI residential care provider in the state. She was talking about the increases in costs in the last year, how she's had to increase her starting salary from $12.50 an hour to $16 an hour, how food has gone constantly up. She altogether has 72 beds, 3 facilities, two of 16 and one of 40. And what she told me yesterday was, if the current trend continues for another year or so, I will be getting out of the business, and my 72 beds will go with me. And that's it. Thank you for your patience. I will be happy to try any questions you have.
All right, I see at least 3. Representative Popovici Mueller, then Representative Edwards, then Representative Leishman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for taking questions. This is more of a request. Could we get this spreadsheet sent to us in electronic form? Because honestly, working off paper is not that effective, and would appreciate that.
Absolutely. I have
Thank
it
you.
in Excel, and I'd be happy to send it to you all.
Thanks.
Representative Edwards for a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We're going to have substantial conversations on all of this on Medicaid Day in Division 3. I invite you all to come in when that's on the calendar. And then I'm horrible at your last name. I know Alex is your first name.
Yes.
You started to hit multiple different types of bed rates. If you could maybe I already have this information somewhere, but if you to the extent that you're aware of varying bed rates, what they are for, how much they are, and when they went into effect last, I'd appreciate having Division 3 use that as a reference document.
Absolutely. I will prepare that and present it to Division 3. Happy
Right.
to do that.
Yeah.
All right, thank you, sir.
The daily rate for residential care is $56.88.
I don't want to hear it. I want
Okay.
to.
I just wanted to make
We'll
one
get it to
other
you.
one other comment. There was a reference to a $95 rate, which is
No, you're talking.
which is an 805 rate, which is inaccurate. There is no 805 rate. But
Thank you.
okay.
Representative Leishman for a question.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and hope this question is easy. Are most of these facilities tax exempt or not for profit? I have no idea what the difference between 805 or 804. I leave that to my colleagues on Division 3, but I'm just curious.
Many of them are organized as not-for-profits, but not all of them. The smaller homes tend to be for-profit, not that they make one. Friendship Manor was a C Corp, technically for-profit, but again, we didn't make one. My wife and I were able to do that for 37 years because we didn't depend upon it to live. One of us always worked outside of the manor to basically support our family.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Any further questions from committee members? Representative McGuire.
Thank you. I'm also not very familiar with this. So there are some assisted living in the state that are not on this list. For example, my
No.
county, I think, has assisted living. No?
I'm sorry, what?
I think my county has an assisted living facility. Is that right? I mean,
Some counties have assisted livings, yes. There are 3 or 4.
is that it? Everything else that's private, everything that's private would be on this list. Is that
Yeah.
right?
Assisted living is not a licensure term. The licensure term is residential care. There is in RSA 161J a stipulation that someone who advertises as an assisted living home must be licensed, but there is no assisted living license. So assisted living homes are licensed as either residential care, which is 804, or supported residential care, which is 805.
May I follow up? Thank you.
A follow-up. I was going to mention there are 2 on here that I recognize. One I was on the board of for a while. That was run by the Masons, and the Masons supported it. And the one in Rockingham County, the county supports it. So some of these are supported by others than just the money that's coming in. Thank you.
Yeah, I looked for my county and I didn't see it. So anyway, so what's the basic difference between 804 and 805? Is it simply 16 beds or more?
No.
15 or less? No. Okay.
It has nothing to do with bed size. It has to do with the level, supposedly, with the acuity of the population served. In other words, how sick are they? How impaired are they? What do they need in terms of nursing services? It is very, very unclearly defined in both law and regulation, though. There's a lot of overlap, in other words.
Okay, one more. Thank you. The fiscal note implies that 804s get one rate and 805s get a different rate, but you said that's incorrect.
That's incorrect. There are two acuity-based rates, which came out of a pilot program, and I believe it was in 2002. Okay, they were intended largely for memory care or Alzheimer's care. The pilot program was more or less successful. There were 3 homes that participated in it, one of which no longer does. The pilot program was continued. So currently there are 2 homes that receive those rates, but only 2 homes. They are both 805s, but it's not an 805 rate. One of the things our association recently requested was, could we go back to that concept, go back to the successful pilot, and have acuity-based rates? In other words, open these rates up to something more than 2 homes out of 136.
And that rate's about $80.
There are 2 rates. One is about 85, the other is about 95.
Thank you.
Further questions from committee members? All right, seeing none, now we'll hear from the counties.
Thank you.
Kate
Thank
Horgan
you all.
from the New Hampshire Association of Counties.
Uh-huh.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Kate Horgan. I represent the New Hampshire Association of Counties, which is all of your elected and appointed officials at county government level. The association does not have a formal position on this bill, but to answer Representative McGuire's question, there are 3 counties that also have an assisted living facility. They are Rockingham, Merrimack, and Cheshire County. The association would ask that if you are to consider this, to please do it for all rates. Doing it for a small subset doesn't make sense. All facilities are facing workforce shortages, small margins. All of you are members of your county delegations. You know your nursing homes operate at a deficit every single year. So we would just ask that you, if you're going to increase the rates, you increase them for everyone and not a small subset. I'm happy to take any questions that the committee has.
Representative McGuire.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for coming. What is the total number of beds in these 3 facilities?
I would have to get back to you on that, Representative McGuire, but I can certainly get that number for you.
Representative Heath.
Thank
for a
you.
question.
Thank you for taking my question. Do you have any idea what the waiting list is statewide for nursing homes?
I can
County nursing homes.
Thank you for the question, Representative. I can speak to the counties for the nursing homes. The average is over 100 people for every single county right now. Some counties have more. I know Cheshire County, for example, I think is at 120 right now, and they just had to close an entire wing because they cannot staff that wing.
Representative Popovici Muller.
Thank you. I had a meeting with Jason Smith, who's managing the Rockingham County homes, and a lot of what we talked about were exactly those challenges about, the rates being so low. It makes it really hard for them to be able to pay the wages that would allow them to retain the staff, and that's where all the workforce, issues are starting. Does your association have, its own guideline? I mean, this is a bill proposed, but do you have any, broad position from your associations in terms of what the rates should be? And if so, could you provide those suggestions to us?
We do not. We are actually working on that. Senator Rosenwald actually has a bill that would raise all Medicaid rates for all Medicaid rates across the board, and we are in the process of figuring out what those numbers should be. I believe it's Senate Bill 86.
Further questions from the committee? Seeing none,
Thank you very much.
we will close the hearing on House Bill 527. And is there a list? A blue sheet? Yep, it's coming. Oh, we got one person wants to speak. Identify yourself, please. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman. My name is Rob Berry. I'm with the Department of Health and Human Services. I thought I submitted a pink card. Apparently didn't get to you. I apologize for that. To my right, I have Ms. Christy Roy, and she can explain what she does for the department.
I'm Christy Roy, and for the department, I work in the rate setting area for DHHS.
So we wanted to just provide a little bit of information prior to the work session. We don't have a formal position on this bill either, but we did want to give a little insight as to how we got to our fiscal analysis. So the department does not believe it's permissible to target rates as is contemplated by this legislation, that being the size of a facility and the Medicaid utilization rate. We base our rates on the acuity level of individuals within the assisted living facilities. So we have currently 3 different rates, the lowest one being the 58 and change, and the highest one being somewhere around
It's 9541 currently.
9541. So we're happy to
Say
work.
the last one again.
9541. So there are 2 dementia level rates. So there's the standard residential care rate for CFI, which is, or Choice for Independence, which is the 5688. The second rate is dementia level 1, which is 8474. And the third rate is for dementia care level 2, which is 9541. They're service-based rates. We don't have a facility-specific rate model for this. So that's where the challenge comes in. It's a service level rate, so that's where the acuity would be. It's additional acuity services needed for those additional dementia levels.
Thank you. Questions from the committee members? Representative Edwards, then Representative McGuire.
Thank you to the department for coming to this. I look forward to doing a deep dive on all of this in Division 3. And you heard me ask Alex a little while ago if he's got a sheet on all the different categories of bed rates and when they were established and how much they are. I think if we had a comprehensive document to look at, that would help us go through and figure out what we want to do to the big picture and not just one-offs.
Sure. And we're trying to also have somebody from licensing come to the work session as well to explain the differences between HEE 804 and 805, if that would help the committee as well.
All right. And you know the way that works. Mr. Ripple schedules with Nathan White, and then you guys get alerted.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you.
Representative McGuire for a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for coming. So we heard earlier that a total of 535 beds are receiving these 3 rates, I guess. Is that true, or is there more?
That's likely. Go ahead.
So for state fiscal year 22, the total days that I had pulled from our MMIS system, which is our Medicaid Management Information System, was just under 200,000 total days.
I'm going to have to get my calculator.
Representative Popovici Mueller.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for being here and answering questions. I mean, you've been here when we were hearing the testimony about the impact of the, lower rates to, the ability of the centers to provide service. Obviously, that testimony is, narrow in the sense that it reflects their experience. For you as the department, could you provide any color or information to us in terms of whether the current rates allow for the centers to sustainably operate, or is there concern at the department level over these trends? I just would like to hear your thoughts on this.
I believe we'd have to get back to you on that. We'd have to speak to some people at the department to get their views on it.
Thank you. And that's more of a Finance 3 question anyway, but I thought while we were here, if you could share something would also help.
Certainly.
Representative Petrie.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for being here. Has these closings around the state, has that put, additional pressure on these, on finding beds?
So I can't speak to that personally. I will try to get somebody from licensing here, but I can say that I would expect that that would put additional pressure on facilities and individuals who are looking for beds to have fewer available.
Representative Stringham.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for taking my question. The rates on, you mentioned that the rates paid vary by the acuity. Is there anything in the fee schedule that incorporates things like local wage index, indigent care factors, or capital issues, or anything that would affect that? And could you also comment on what restricts you from incorporating a % Medicaid as a factor in setting the rate?
I'm going to defer to Christy on that.
So again, it's a service-based rate. They were increased 5% from HB2 in July. They're a CFI rate, so any other CFI legislation would also affect this rate. In the rate methodology that was determined, when it was set, there was an outsourced company, I believe, that worked with the department to come up with those original rates. And then my understanding in the waivers, there's information about updating annually based on the CMS market basket for CFI rates. And then they are additionally held to a budget adjustment factor or a budget neutrality factor. So there's plenty of complexities in that rate methodology that you can add to.
Quick follow-up. How many facilities have waivers on the base rate? Or do you, I thought you said some do.
Waivers on the base rate, meaning
waivers so they have an adjustment.
So the adjustment is service level based, so it would depend on the qualifications within that service or the need of what's required for the service. It's not a facility specific adjustment. So if there are only 2 facilities that would provide that additional level of service or that additional level of care and what's required for that additional level of care, there are 2 facilities, but there's no limitation to the quantity of facilities that could provide that additional level of care if they so choose. They just have to, I would assume, apply for and prove that that's the additional level of care they're providing for that service.
Representative Edwards for a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This could just be a really short answer. The 5% that you mentioned in HB2, it's my understanding that expires at the end of this HB2 period and rolls back to the previous level unless reauthorized in the next HB2, or was that a permanent increase to the baseline going forward?
My understanding is it's permanent, but
We can look into that for you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Historically, adjustments to rates, when you're reducing it, you have to prove that it's not affecting access to care for Medicaid. So if there is an adjustment to that rate, a decrease, it would be a significant lift to prove access to care, especially with what we're hearing today.
Further questions from committee members? Seeing none, we did find your card. Sorry we lost it.
That's all right.
Anybody else that wishes to make comments on House Bill 527? Seeing none, I have on the blue sheet just the 2 Campbells that have signed in pro, both Ann Campbell and Packy Campbell. No other signatures on there. Thank you all. I'm going to close this hearing on House Bill 527. You'll be hearing more from Division 3 when it will be scheduled for probably continued on with all the other Medicaid rate discussion. Thank you all for your testimony. Thank you all for coming. I'll close this hearing.
So with that, I'd like to open Division 3. I'm going to immediately put us into recess until, say, 12:35. So that should give people time to go get something to eat and come back. We'll be in here at 12:35 to deal with 3 bills. We're in recess. All right, we were supposed to start at 12:35. It's 12:50, 15 minutes late. That's on me. We're out of recess. We're here in a Division III work session. On the calendar is to discuss House Bill 49 that we've had in Division III for a little while, House Bill 527 that we just talked about in full finance today and could talk about it a little bit today. And the star attraction of today is SB1. So I'm going to start with I think to get a sense of where we're at, I'd like to get a straw vote. I have been a supporter of SB1 from the beginning. We're going to take that up first, I think, SB1, and I would like everyone to tell us through a straw vote where they think they are on SB1. And then we can talk about an amendment to SB1 that's the same thing as the amendment to 49. So those conversations will converge. But to establish a baseline, I think we need to make sure that there's absolute clarity on where people are with SB1. So I would take a motion to on OTP of SB1. No, it's going to be, it's not a real vote. I'm taking a straw. I want to make sure I know where people are at. I think the public needs to know where people are at on this.
Okay, so Mr. Chairman, subject to our conversations of yesterday, it seems like we're formulating a good amendment. So I would make the motion to ought to pass on Senate Bill 1.
All right, is there a second? Second, okay. Is there the discussion on this is that the Senate passed SB1 24-0. This was an enormous high water mark in the past decade where people have often said that we needed to do something to replace the Sununu Center. And the desire to do something reached kind of a boiling point 2 years ago when the legislature passed into law the closure of the Sununu Center on 1 March of this year. That's just a few weeks from now. The legislature had an opportunity to pass a committee of conference report and did not. The reason the committee of conference report failed, it was really, I think, predominantly around capacity. There were different views on what the capacity ought to be. There was a position that went with the House representatives of 6. The Senate had a vision of 12 with a flexibility of up to 18. When that topic came up, the conversations broke down and the committee of conference broke up and didn't complete any work. So here we are. Nobody introduced anything last year to fix this problem. We creep into this year now, about to begin our budget cycle with the Sununu Center closing in a few days, and the legislature still has not acted. So SB1 is half of the legislature acting strongly and convincingly with a 24-0 vote. It's hard to beat 24-0 in the Senate. That bill came over to the House for us to consider. The House has looked at this issue in multiple different ways. Children and Family Law saw a similar bill with House Bill 120, in which Division III was invited to that. Then we had House Bill 49, where we've gone through a lot of discussion, deep discussion on amendments. It started with the Wallner Amendment, and then Division III came to a significant agreement yesterday. And so we've got that. And so we are on the cusp of success and doing our job. And so what I think a vote on SB1 will do will be to bring us to concur with all of the hard work of the Senate that's been done and supported by the department, that's been done and supported by the advocacy group and the public, that's been done and supported, and we have a letter from the governor. So out of respect for all of those people that have looked at this and have delivered us SB1, I would like us to vote. Do we think yes or no? We can support SB1 or not? So this is not a formal vote. This is a sense of the committee. Is there any further discussion? Yes, Representative Hull.
Thank you, Chairman. I think yesterday in Division 3, we had a very productive session, talked about a number of things. Somehow, along the way, we ended up with this deadline of March 1st, that in some ways is an artificially driven deadline by prior law. It's not like the building stops working on March 2nd. The goal of kind of figuring out what you want to do before you go do it is an important thing to me as an engineer. And what I see now is we're trying to create and spend money, but we haven't defined the location or what the facility is before we even get there. And we're saying go spend right $15 million. So hearing what you said, there's a lot of people that say this is a good idea, and it did pass out of the Senate 24-0, but I think we're not quite ready there. So as amended by the Senate and passed by the Senate, I can't support it.
I respect your conclusion. I just want to bring some facts that we've heard in testimony, and that we heard that the $15 million that found its home in SB1 was the original estimate that came about as a result of there being a special committee on the Sununu Replacement Center, and that what we have experienced in the past year or so of delay is a very strong inflationary problem with supply chain issues, and that delay in this case probably contributed from going from a $15 million estimate to a $21.6 million estimate. And I don't know what another delay would do. If this is still a good idea at the end of the day, does it become a $25 million good idea or not? I do think we've been given some numbers, and I can understand that we've had bizarre inflation in the United States over the last 2 years. So that attributes the distinction between the 15 and the 21.6. I'm not saying that to change your mind. I'm just making sure that the record's complete.
Right. Thank you. So I agree, and this goes back to, I think yesterday in our committee or division, we had a great work session to work out some of these issues. I'm going to come to page 4, lines 30 and 31. Quote, in no event shall the total expenditures from all sources for the design and construction of the new secured youth development facility exceed $15 million, end quote. Right, that is in severe conflict, right? And that bill was drafted this year. We're not talking about something from 2 years ago. The Senate could have, in their due diligence, put in a number that was more representative of the cost of a facility. That's on top of where is it and whether it's for 6 to 12 or 12 to 18. And I think our amendment that was proposed yesterday to start looking at some of those issues was critical. That's why I'm having trouble with what was passed out of the Senate.
All right, thank you. Representative Stringham, you have anything to add to the discussion?
Well, I'm against SB1 as written, given our lengthy discussions yesterday and the direction we were taking. Thanks.
Thank you. Representative Weiler?
We have to pass something. We're 2 years behind. There's a date coming up within days. We can't just say we're going to kill this and start over again. There isn't enough time. Next week, we're going to get the budget and we're going to be buried in it. We got to do something now, today, to move this along. If we pass SB1, even if there's things in it you don't like, the most important thing in it was move the date out. Then when we get to the spending and the rest of it, we're going to be able to adjust that within the budget process and put it in HB2 if need be. Any amendments to it that we decide needs to be in there. But we've got to pass something to move the date away from March 1st.
So I wasn't clear. This is probably not exactly the way the parliamentarian would run this, but we're talking about SB1. I still intend to have us discuss the Division 3 amendment that we came to agreement on last night. So I want to see where we are on SB1 before we begin to entertain the Division 3 amendment and to find out if anyone else has brought an amendment forward for us. So, all right. So, Representative Wallner.
I would not support Senate Bill 1 as it's before us right now. I would want to take a look at amendments to it, and I'm really concerned that we still do not know the location of this facility, and I think that that's one of the first things we need to do is try to figure out where it is going to be and work with the communities and then move forward from there. And I think in the budget is the place that we need to be looking at the financial aspects of this. I would support, the department has testified a number of times that they need additional funds to get through this biennium, and I would support allocation of additional funds for them.
Thank you for that. Discussion, Representative Tulerski.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. SB 1 is written, I think, as a division we've pinpointed some problems with, and I would support discussion of the amendments that we have reviewed in the past few days.
Thank you. Representative Nordgren.
I agree with Mary Jane and Laura.
Representative Mooney.
Certainly, we did spend a great session, as Representative Hole said, on amending it. So I think to move forward, I would suggest voting ought to pass on the bill and then take up the amendments if that's in order.
All right. So I think we just took a straw vote while we got the discussion. I recorded in my head as 3 yay OTP, 5 nay on passing SB1 or recommending a passage out of Division 3. Does anyone want to have me go around and do a more formal vote, or would you accept that it's probably 3-5? Okay. So thank you. Let's transition. Mr. Ripple, have you laid out the current amendment that we worked on last night? All right. Thank you. Actually, there was another change, dinky little typo that that has since been fixed since you had an email.
Mr. Chairman, was the issue of quorum addressed in that typo? There was a question raised regarding quorum.
Yeah, we can talk about that, but the short answer is yes. We changed the numbers of representatives from the local community from 3 to just being representatives to let the commission find its right size. And then without a clear number of how many would be on the commission, we made it a majority of those appointed to the commission. So I think that resolved that issue. And what we just talked about is we're jumping around a little bit, but since you brought it up, on page 2, line 15 and line 16, a version that you saw last night said 3 representatives, and instead of saying 3 representatives, we made it generically representatives, and that was so that we didn't waste motion. We've heard that there are 3 potential places we could go. One of them doesn't sound like it's going to pass the common sense test. So why delay the commission looking for somebody to sit on the board that's irrelevant? So that's why that got changed. And then the other little typo from what you saw last night is on line 34, relative to a commission to study community impacts. That phrase is consistent with the way we described the commission in the amendment, and last night had the previous title, committee to study public safety. So it's just internally, making the document internally compatible. There's no change. So, so we're looking at Amendment 0454 hotel. It basically on step 9, I think we're unanimous that we want the repeal of the closure date. I haven't heard any disagreement today about the appropriation of $1.5 million so that they can continue operations through the balance of the year. That's 4 months of operating expense. Anything that they don't spend would end up getting lapsed back anyways. So is there any discussion, or are we okay? Everyone's okay with that appropriation? Okay, so now we're down to line 15. There's now some contention on what was birthed in the Wallner Amendment, which was putting aside the sum of $2 million so that they could the department could begin to acquire services for site evaluation. Everyone says we need site evaluation, so there's site evaluation in that $2 million. Architect consultation and development of design options for any replacement facility. We went on to say that we want 2 options considered. We want an option for 6 to 12, and we wanted an option of 12 to 18. So that's in this version of the amendment that didn't come in initially, but we added it in our conversations and agreements last night. Department shall present its recommended site for the facility no later than the 30th of September. I know that there's a lot of pressure to do it sooner than that. I think if we just listen to what's in the wind, it's already been determined where it's probably going to be, and I don't understand that being as contentious as it has become, but so be it. Line 22, the appropriation contained in this section shall not lapse in June of 25. This is different than the operations money. This is the architect money, and then the governor can draw a warrant. So that is what is in line 15. The first things first. Is this consistent with what you think we said last night? This is a different question than whether or not you still support it today. The first thing is this accurate? Is anyone disputing the accuracy of what we did? Okay. So I will say that I support this from the Wallner Amendment because it makes sense. You on a critical path, we want a new facility so that we can transition to a fully therapeutic model that's in the benefit or best interests of the kids, best interests of New Hampshire. And on the critical path, these services, site selection is kind of the first step. And I'm hearing people say, we got to do site evaluation, but we don't need to appropriate the money to do site evaluation. We just need to do site evaluation. And so this is a do loop in the software world that just has me boggled. So this is let's one step at a time. Let's go do the site evaluation. Let's go appropriate the money. So that was my discussion of lines 25 through 31. Are there other points of view? We'd love to hear other points of view.
Thank you.
Representative Wallner.
Well, when I got home last night and I started reading this, I always went back to, it feels like we're putting the cart, maybe the whole train, before the horse. It's just, I think someone needs to make a decision about the site. And I think one of the best ways to make that decision is for the department to say where they think they would be most in favor of being co-located, because they say that there's a lot of efficiencies, there's a lot of things to be gained by one site over another. And so I think that would be the first thing that needs to happen, is deciding where it's going to be. And then the next part of that is working with the commission around that, which is made up of people from the communities, and start working with them around the kinds of things that you think the community needs to have available, needs to know about the program before we move into architectural drawings, design, all of those other things. Let's decide where it is. The sooner we do that, I think the better equipped we will be to move forward. And I also think that a lot of this is really budget work, because there are still sums of money that need to be appropriated in the budget.
So for clarification, would you strike that entire paragraph, or would you perhaps reduce the amount of money appropriated and limit the work simply to site evaluation? Because we've not technically done a site evaluation, which is the normal first step in project management before you select a site. So would you preserve the paragraph and limit it so that we put some money into site selection?
What I would do is I would direct the department to make the best choice from programmatic reasons, which site they prefer. And I don't think that would necessarily need financial support.
If they were to do that today, would that be dispositive in your view? I mean, it seems to me like we would need something formal from the commissioner or somebody. I think we already know they want Hampstead. Everyone wants Hampstead. But the problem is, if you live in Hampstead, you have not been respected yet. We haven't gone to Hampstead to say, hey, this is what we're thinking. What's it going to involve? Well, so what this amendment does is say, okay, here's some money, here's the commission, go forward and start working with the various communities. We can't show up and say, in my view, we've already decided it's going to be in Hampstead. Now you tell us why that's not a good idea. That's not the way this should work. This should be us coming to them saying, hey, look, we're looking at 3 alternatives, and this one's got these advantages, these one's got those disadvantages, and by God, you were just right, you know. I think you're asking. We keep talking about process. I think your approach breaks a normal process. We should do site evaluation and work respectfully with the 3 communities before we stick a pin in the map and say, this is where it shall be, deal with it, which is my really rough translation of what I'm hearing you say, Representative. And I apologize. That was rude. I don't mean it to be rude. After 2 years, I'm getting a little surly.
I would have the department, this is me talking, I would have the department say where it is they feel is the best location for this facility, from a standpoint of what is going to meet the needs of the kids, the families, and to start that conversation now with the community. And there's no reason to be speaking, to me, there's no reason to be speaking with 3 different communities all at the same time. When the department, you may be right, the department may already know where they want to go. And now's the time to start talking with that community and start really understanding what this involves.
So, Mr. Ripson, I think we've heard a lot from you and picked up on your reluctance to just answer the question point blank. Is this your supervisor, your manager, your director, your assistant commissioner in the audience? Because I'd love to hear from you. I would like to hear from the person highest in the food chain on this, because I think poor Mr. Ripson is being put in a highly awkward spot where he doesn't have the authority to say that it's going to be in Hampstead. And,
So-
and if I were Mr. Williams, I'd advise him not to say that. If it is his friend, I would say, I don't think you should answer that question. But you are a leader. You get paid the big bucks. Come on up and tell us what you really think about Hampstead, please.
All due respect, I think I'm a leader too, and to be fair, right, there, as I've shared, there are 3 possible sites that are being considered. I think it was pretty clear when we spoke yesterday, of the 3 possible sites, which one is the most advantageous, and that is Hampstead. But until we actually do the work to do site evaluation to determine if that's even feasible, for us to say that that's the site would be irresponsible, right? So that's I don't think we can give you the solid answer you want until the work is done to see. And even then, that might not be the final decision because, right, the department also is not the final decider on these things, right? We work in an executive branch that has a governor and executive council. So, you know, the opinion that I express is not necessarily what the final decision is. So, you know, I understand frustration in wanting an answer, but at the same time, you know, if I give you an answer, it's an answer that I don't actually have the ability to provide. And an answer that would be
So as an
ill-informed.
Army guy who trained Afghans how to shoot, we taught them ready, aim, fire. We didn't teach them ready, fire, aim. And that's what I think I'm hearing is we want to just say, okay, we're ready. Go ahead and fire. We're going to go to Hampstead. And then later we'll keep figuring out that's going to be the aiming. I don't want to do that. I want us to get ready. I want us to aim at the 3 sites, and then I want us to pull the trigger on the correct site. There's a disciplined process here. I'd love to follow it. And Madam Deputy Commissioner, would you read your
Associate
name
Commissioner
for the record?
Marissa Henn, and I'll concur with Joe. And I think there are many, considerations that need to be put into this. I think Joe presented yesterday to your committee on
Yes.
some of the shared saving possibilities. Joe and I work closely with Hampstead Hospital, but there may be other considerations as well. So we really are not in a position, nor is it our role to be stating what the site should be. So we can't get there today.
Okay, I hope the media is fair with you. We've asked you to step into a very awkward situation, and I apologize, and I hope you're treated fairly. Representative Nordgren, and then Representative Hool.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would just like your comments on the amendment we have to Senate Bill 1. We just saw it today, and I just was wondering if you had any comments about it.
So, in general, right, I still support Senate Bill 1. I think that the work has been done to know where we need to move this. Yes, there's some questions that aren't going to be answered until we move through the process. And, honestly, I'd wish that we had the type of trust in each other that we can move forward and trust that we're going to make decisions about these things in the best interest of the folks that we serve. And it's disappointing to me that we don't have that trust. That's what I think is the right path forward. The amendment, there's some very critical things that have to happen right now. The most critical thing that has to happen right now is that the facility doesn't close in 3 weeks. That absolutely needs to happen, hopefully by the end of the day today, that there's agreement on that, and that there's movement on that. I would like us to move forward with the rest of the package, but that's the absolutely critical point.
You have a follow-up? Representative Hull.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Coming at this from a technical background and thinking about process, right? There's 3 options that are currently in play. I'm not aware of any others. No one has discussed any others, but typically you rank them relative to one another over a number of criteria. When can the department have that information to us?
I think I've already kind of assessed for everybody yesterday what the department's position is on that, right? So
Follow up. So part of this also is getting some feedback from the various communities that are in play, right? So it's more than just
correct
how the department sees it. One of the criteria on this list by which we will be making the decision, right, is how the community feels, what the impact of the community will be in terms of public services, a bunch of other things that were discussed yesterday in our division. I'm used to seeing this as something called a Pew chart, PUGH, which is a process by which you do this. You rank your options on one axis and you rank the criteria by which you're going to score those options on the other axis, and then you just do the analysis and go through this. I would personally like to see that as soon as possible. I don't know how quickly we can do that. That might involve having a meeting over in Hampstead, might have a meeting in Concord, somewhere to find and get some feedback. That may take a couple of days. I hear you that we need to address the issue of closure right away. Got it. Which is, in my eyes, at least lines 9 and following at a minimum. But I would like to see that the department takes lead and starts to schedule public feedback sessions from these communities so we understand that, because that's important information into making this decision. I'm not sure if that was a question or not, but I guess it's if that is the request, any idea how long it would take to schedule that and get back to us?
I don't know how long that would take. I'd have to look into that and talk to other folks.
So let me ask you about criticality. I know what the hot, urgent, burning issues are, the two. We need more time. We need some operations money. Got it. Okay. I'm pretty fired up on the idea that we have some ARPA money out there that we have to hit some milestones in order to be able to use it. I'm not a gopher expert, but I think it's fairly clear that the longer we wait, the more at risk. I can't measure that risk. I just think that it's there, that the longer we wait, the more there's risk. So is it critical that we go ahead and begin the site evaluation that's in this paragraph on the $2 million appropriation? Is it critical that we begin that and fund that now? Or do you already have the money and ability to go ahead and begin that formal site evaluation without legislative action?
We do not have the resources to do any of that. The process that had been envisioned working with DAS and Department of Public Works, that was going to be built into the contract with the future, design firm. If you're talking about carving that out as a separate process altogether, I'd have to talk to the Department of Public Works about what that would look like. I couldn't speculate as to what that would look like.
So just to close this, and I'll come to you, Representative Weiler. Yes or no? Do you think the appropriation so that you can begin the contracted site evaluation is urgent? Is that a critical issue? Is that something we ought to be doing like now or not?
I think that if the goal is to get this right, the goal that I've always understood for the past couple years was that this needs to get done immediately, right? There were timelines put on this that were incredibly tight and ambitious under the best of circumstances. That's why we went ahead and started working with DPW and architects to try to be ready to go at the moment that this legislature said go. If that's no longer the reality, then that is what it is, right? I would want to move as much as possible as soon as possible, because I feel that if we don't actually get to work on this, what I fear is that we're not going to ever get this done. I sat in the hearing room downstairs 5 years ago listening to, people admonish us for not doing this, 6 months after I walked into New Hampshire for the first time in my life. And, frankly, it's time to get it done. And so I'd rather do something than nothing.
So Madam Commissioner, yes or no? Is the money to begin the site evaluation critical or not?
I do believe it's critical, and part of what haunts me is imagining the staffing issues that are going to transpire without any serious plan. And I think that is indicative of forward movement, and it's already going to be hard enough to keep the place functioning safely.
Thank you. Representative Weiler. Well, have you been waiting, Representative Tulerski? Because I know Representative Weiler is ready. Do you have something?
It's related to what you were saying, which was a clarification for what we heard yesterday, which was it sounded to me, and I guess I'm trying to figure out if I'm wrong, that yesterday we heard the department is moving forward in the process of determining the best site. And you did not need us to give you that green light to do it. And you did not need us to give you the part of the $2 million to get that done. So I guess I'm confused as to what was just exchanged here.
No, I'm not sure exactly what you were calling from yesterday or if I misspoke, but the site evaluation was always intended to be part of the contract with the external architects. That piece of the work was through them. Making the final determination around site can't be done until that work is done, right? And that work was going to be the first part of what would be done under that contract. So yesterday I remember talking about that would be something that would probably be, from my memory, because I haven't looked at that proposal recently, would have been done first and probably in a matter of weeks to a month or so from the start of that contract. So that would be the first piece of work done on that contract, and that it would therefore be information that would be available for the September 30 date for the committee that was being discussed yesterday. But the site evaluation work was always a component of what needed to be done to make a final decision about a location. We couldn't make a final decision without doing that work.
Do you have a follow-up?
No.
All right, Representative Weiler and then Representative Nordgren.
I've been to all three sites. I was a representative for Hampstead for 20 years before redistricting. I've talked with the representatives from Hampstead and the senator who was involved in Senate Bill 1. There's more flexibility on Hampstead than any other site. It's about 100 acres of woods. It's off the beaten path. It's not on a main road. A lot of people in Hampstead don't even know it's there. This is the hospital that presently exists. And we talked about putting it near the site in Manchester, but it would need another kitchen. It would need somebody to provide meals. That isn't there. They don't have a laundry. If they get to Hampstead or Concord, they have shared facilities. They could have meals brought from another facility as well as laundry. But having sat through the review on the secure psychiatric facility on Concord, I know the limitations that we've heard about Concord, and there isn't that many places you could try it, and they talk of wetlands and all that stuff. So there's more flexibility and where it would go and what can be done in Hampstead, as well as providing adjacent services. That puts it out in front in my book, and I don't think the Hampstead people are going to be objective to it for that small population, and that plus they're getting the property taxes. I think we've got that included, that they would have lost by the private hospital being sold. So I think that was a big stumbling block for Hampstead, which has gone away as far as I'm concerned. So I think that we can be certain that it will end up in Hampstead, and that, you know, they may fine tune it a little more and pick exactly the site they want in Hampstead, but I think that place has the most flexibility and is way ahead of the other sites. So I wish we could agree on this and get the ball rolling. I don't want to see this happen where we're already 2 years behind or maybe 5 years behind. We can't keep kicking the can down the road. Let's move and accept this amendment and pass SB 1 and SB 49. They're both the same. We can move forward on this. I hate to see all this delays. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Weiler. And as the chair of the committee, let me ask you a question. It's getting close to 1:30, where you said you'd be pulling us out of recess of the full finance. It feels to me like I need another 20 minutes to be able to give you a clear recommendation of Division 3, where we stand on this amendment or any other amendment. So,
Get it done.
Get it done? Okay, thank you, sir. Representative Nordgren?
Yeah, I just wanted to add to the discussion, and yesterday I was watching online and I was texting Mary Jane and Laura, because I think we have to keep considering the employees of this organization. I think all the indecision is hard for them. I think everyone's having trouble retaining employees under the conditions we have now. So I think we have urgency for that reason to make a decision and get things moving so people who work there know where they're going, know what they're doing, have some stability in their lives, so you can hire more people, in fact. So I just wanted to say that. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't hear a question in there, unless you want to argue with her. Representative Stringham, do you have?
Yeah, just it seems to me that down to the minutia of what we're talking about, it sounds like you would need some appropriation to go through the site evaluation process as you described. So moving the number from 2 million to 0 would hamper your progress somewhat. If we more limited, and by the way, I trust you with my life. This is just, I'm just here to represent the community and make sure when we ask them to pay money that we're getting something from it. So, and I thank you very much for all your testimony over the last few days. I don't know which way we as a group will go and continue with this larger package or limit it to site evaluation. But if there's a number less than 2 million and bigger than 0 that would allow you full flexibility to go through with the site evaluation, what would that number be?
The truth is, I don't know the answer to that question, right? The 2 million, all of these numbers have come from the Department of Administrative Services and the Division of Public Works, who are the experts in how we build things and everything else in the state of New Hampshire. And in fact, DHHS, we're the DPW is the lead on all these efforts, and we're kind of the client who is consulting on what the needs are around these efforts. So anything I would give would be a total guess, and I really, somebody else's guess would probably be better than mine.
Yeah, I would wag 400,000. That would be my wag, just doing projects in the past. But all right, any other questions on this? Because what I'd like to do now is I want to get a sense of the division on lines 25 through 31. I'm going to ask two things. Hopefully it only becomes one thing. I would like to know, yes or no, do you accept the language that's already written on Amendment 0454, lines 25 through 31, as is? Representative Hull?
I have no issues with the language. I do ask for a clarification, though, because in line 27, we have request to procure a qualified architect. And then in line 28, right, which is start the project immediately. I hear that, right, get the architect up and running. And then in line 28, I hear request to procure a contractor to build. And I don't think that's going in parallel. So it's the same language with two different actions. And I just want to make sure that I understand, or that we somehow document, that this is to get to define where we're going, but not necessarily go build. And I think I would interpret request to procure a contractor meaning more of an RFP, right, request for proposal process, as opposed to issue a PO. But that, I just would like that clarified.
I think I had stumbled on this before, and we had initially written request for proposal, and that got changed somewhere along the line. And I think you've picked up a nice little rub there that we want to figure out the way it should lay down. The first one, I think, is a request to procure, because all the RFP stuff has been done. They're ready to pull the trigger, I believe. Mr. Ribson, do you want to tell us if they're both meant to be requests for procure? And if we do tend to limit, if we decide to limit this, do we need to strike that authorization language?
So DPW uses multiple different types of procurement tools. Right. And again, this is outside of my scope of expertise, but I've learned a little bit trying to go through this process. And they don't typically use the request for proposal tool, even though that's the tool that we typically use in DHHS. Right. So the reason why we used the language procure was just to be flexible in the type of public procurement tool that they would use, to not prescribe which tool is appropriate, that they would use the request for X, whatever that is. Based on their, expertise and judgment as the best way to publicly, legally, appropriately procure that service.
I just realized I was on the wrong section. We're still on lines 15 through 24, and I got myself jumbled.
Oh.
But that was good foreshadowing. Representative Hull, would your concern about the second request for procure be satisfied if we ended up striking on line 17 the phrase architect consultation and development of design options?
I am okay with that. I am okay with what we agreed to yesterday.
Okay.
Both are options. If we're going to change the effort, right, then probably the amount spent should also
Right.
be changed.
So I'll go back to what I meant to say. We're going yes or no. Do you accept the language as written for lines 15 through 24?
Yes.
Representative Stringham?
I prefer what you just described.
So you're open to a modification.
I'm
You
open to a
don't, so you're a no on just accepting this language.
Well, I'm still listening, so I'll say no.
Thank you. Representative Weiler, yes or no on those lines?
Yes, and also I don't see a problem on 27 and 28. It's a request to procure a qualified architect on or before March 1st, and shall collaborate to issue a request to procure a contractor to build the resulting construction project. That's assumes in my mind after you have the design. It doesn't mean they have to be done at the same moment.
Yeah. So,
I mean, it's the logical way to read it.
so you're a yes on 15 through 24. Representative Wallner,
No, I'm not. in
are,
favor.
are you open to tweaking it to limit it to simply site evaluation?
I think that's what I brought up was site location first. And as far as money in there, I'd have to think about that for a little while longer. And I don't know that 400,000 is the right amount, but that I would replace that whole section with,
Do you have language right now that you can offer the committee? We're on a, March 1 doesn't change because we're still talking.
I could come up with some language.
So you're a no, and you're a no on a simple modification to just leave site evaluation, and the dollar amount. You're a no on either.
Is the dollar amount 400,000?
I would wag it at 400,000. Do you have a better wag?
I don't have the slightest idea what it would be. I would need someone who knew about, someone like from administrative services to tell us
Okay.
if that was the right amount.
All right, 50
Someone
years of
here-
judgment. 400,000 is not a bad wag. Representative Tulersky, do you accept the language as written, lines 15 through 24?
I'm a no on it as written. I would be open to seeing.
You're open to modification,
Yes.
Representative Nordgren? You accept that language as is?
No, I accept change in the language.
You're open to tweaking it?
Yeah, thanks.
Representative Mooney?
I would propose leaving it as is. And also, you brought up a good point that I know our discussions could go on in perpetuity. In fact, it doesn't change the date. It actually brings the date closer. March 1st actually comes closer with every moment that we're here, unfortunately. So I, like Representative Weiler, propose moving this amendment to our exec session. Thank you.
Okay, I'm so sorry, I'm just not there yet. So my head count is 4-4 on accepting the language as is, 4 against, and now I'm going to explore a tweak in an effort to get us to say yes to one another. If we changed on line 16, 2 million to 400,000, and we could put a not to exceed in there just to really, make that more clear. I don't think the department tries to waste money. So we could make that a not to exceed $400,000. And on line 17, leave for the purpose of site evaluation there, because we all agree that's important. And then strike architect consultation, and on 18, delete from the word development through the word through just design options, development of design options. So that would read, for the purpose of site evaluation for replacement facility for the Sununu Youth Center. That is my proposed alternative language. Would you accept that, Representative Hull?
So if I'm hearing what you said, and I'll restate it for clarification, right? 16 is now $400,000. 17, we strike out architect consultation and development of design options. My concern then is lines 18 and 19, the department shall develop 2 design options. We're still mandating that happen, but we didn't fund it. So I think there's a conflict, right? A technical conflict that I don't know what to do with.
Okay, so how about if we strike on line 19,
May I-
shall develop design options, because the rest of this is kind of clarifying on the site evaluation piece of this. For the site evaluation, it's helpful for them to know, starting on 18 on to 19, the department for possibilities, for 2 possibilities, a facility with a capacity of 6 to 12 and a capacity of 12 to 18. So at least they know what they're evaluating.
I am okay with the proposed $400,000 for site evaluation to consider 2 design options, right? Not
Yeah.
architect, not go do detailed engineering drawings, but 2 conceptual, right? And have those as information to present back to the legislature. Because yesterday we spent a lot of time talking about who's making the decision on where this goes. And I
Right.
think there was agreement amongst the entire division that the legislature should be making the decision ultimately on where this is. So the site evaluation and the design options coming back to us is a good thing.
So
yes.
my disclaimer on this as we go flying by is that I know that Mr. Ripple is listening. He's following the intent. He's following the strike throughs. And when he gets to writing an amendment to the amendment, he's probably going to have a tweak in there that makes it smooth without killing the intent. So you do that all the time. So that's where I'm
In favor
going.
of your intent as discussed.
Okay, so Representative Stringham, modified language, would you be open to that, yes or no?
Subject to seeing it, yes.
Okay. Representative Mooney?
Yes, with the caveat, though, that I think by taking out the original language, we move further away from Senate Bill 1. But the answer to your question is yes.
Okay, I think that was a true statement. Representative Weiler? Yes. Representative Wallner?
I think I want to see the language, but yes, I think I can go with that.
Thank you for that. Representative Tulersky?
Yes, upon reviewing it.
Representative Nordgren?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, so good. That part's unanimous. Let's skinny up the section on appropriation to put 400,000 for begin the site evaluation. Okay, then paragraph 4, line 25 through 31. The key thing that this does, the most powerful aspect of this whole section from my point of view, is that final sentence. The SYSC shall immediately be closed for detention or admission of any child when a replacement facility is sufficiently completed that children can be legally and safely housed there. That way we're not facing the guillotine of another date. We're just saying let's do the replacement. Is there any other part of lines 25 through 31 that anyone wants to discuss?
Mr. Chair, as I pointed out earlier, and words matter, and
Yep.
procure versus some sort of proposal, right, are very different to me.
So I'm not disagreeing. I just need words. On line 28, the return request for procure.
proposal.
Change procure to proposal?
Yes, please.
Okay, and the only disclaimer there is we don't know the words that our state uses, but the term request for proposal makes sense to me. So hopefully our state has a similar word. Okay, so you're okay with that change in that word?
I am.
Representative Stringham?
Yeah.
Yes.
Good.
Representative Mooney?
Yes.
Weiler? Representative Wallner?
I'd want to read it, but I think with the word change.
Yep,
it was
yep,
okay.
yep. This is all contingent upon reading it. Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Representative Nord? Yes. Okay. Again, we got some unanimity with the one word change on line 28 for request for to procure to request for proposal. Then on line 32, this is the commission. I recommend we just keep the whole commission. I mean, you know, we're going to go ahead and start the evaluation process. I think this commission is a vital part of it. This commission is limited in its authority. It doesn't make any decisions. It's going to be able to write report lines 1 through 33. Is there an alternative point of view?
Just a small point.
Yes, sir.
Just to comply with 1449, can we just make G and H representative rather than representatives, and perhaps add one House member, make it 4 and 3 or something?
Okay, let's do one at a time. On line 15, and I think the same thing's going to be true on line 17, the word is currently plural, representatives.
Right.
So in the way that I've written things that has been accepted, I don't know if my 5th grade English teacher would agree, but I would put the S of representatives in parentheses. So it could be a representative or representatives without specifying a number. And the reason for not specifying a number is just so that we can do things rationally. If they really get fixated on Hampstead, they can bother the Hampstead people without trying to get a Concord person to show up. So does that work, Mr. Ripple, if we just put the S of representatives in the parenthesis?
I think it could. As Representative Stringham points out, so RSA 1449 caps the number of members of the commission at 15 and contains various other requirements. Senate Bill 1 actually had language saying notwithstanding RSA 1449 that I noticed is missing from this, so I would add that to this language as well.
Tell me what line item you would put notwithstanding.
At the beginning of the sentence, that's at the end of line 5, the commission shall consist of the following members. I would say notwithstanding RSA 1449, the commission shall consist of the following members.
Okay, I'm okay with that. I'm not sure what it means, but I like saying yes. So lines 1 through 33 on page 2, we've suggested tweaks to add the RSA on line 5 and to change representatives to the parenthetical so that we can get the right number. Is there any discussion? Representative Hull, yes or no? Stringham?
I'm good.
No, we're just saying we don't follow 1449 in this case, and that's fine.
Okay, Representative Mooney?
Fine, and I would just point out on line 5, fire safety has been added per our discussions yesterday.
Well, yes, we added other relevant factors too. Yeah, right. Yes, ma'am. Representative Weiler, yes or no? Yes. Representative Wallner?
Yes.
Tulerski?
I'm good with it, thanks.
Nordgren?
Yes, question, Mr. Chair.
Yes.
What's the relationship of the department to this commission? Should they have any ex officio role, or what's their relationship?
Well, if I read line 10 properly, C, the commissioner of the Department of Health and Human Services or designee is on this. And I imagine the designee would be something that looks
That's
like a
probably
Mr.
fine.
Ribson, but
Yeah.
do you have another question? Do you want follow
No,
up?
I think that's fine, thanks.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
is there nothing for this division to report back to the full committee? It's so.
We're getting very close. I'm so sorry. I know you're a fighter pilot. Right.
It's going to be hours. I'm holding up the rest of my committee, thinking you would have a decision by now.
Yes, sir. I thought I'd have
We
a.
all seem to agree.
I thought I'd have a decision 2 years ago. So, okay. So you're okay with that? I think we're all okay with lines 1 through 33. And then the rest of it gets into repeals and effective dates. And I think we're okay with those. All right. Representative Hull, Stringham, Mooney, Weiler, Wallner. Okay. All right. So we have a proposal. If we come back and it's exactly like this, can I expect you to vote yes on this? Yes or no?
Yes.
Yes or no? So that's a yes. Could you speak into the microphone?
Yes, if it's exactly like we just agreed upon.
Thank you. Representative Tulerski,
I just wanted to clarify.
go ahead.
Upon reviewing it,
Yes.
I would be able to support it upon reviewing it.
All right. Thank you. Representative Nordgren?
Yes, thank you.
All right. And that's always implied, you know, you have to be able to read it. Okay. So I think with that, I'm ready to recommend to the whole House, or excuse me, the full committee, that we adopt what will be the modification to 0454 as we've discussed, and have Mr. Ripple go make that happen. And then the rest of the options 49 and 527, I'm going to recess that to the next work session. Any comments?
If you're
concerns?
going to have another work session, then I have to dismiss the rest of the committee.
No, next week. We're not going to do that. We're acting on SB1, sir. We're going to postpone 49 and 527 until a future work session that's already being calendared.
All right, so my point is, I've had the rest of this committee waiting around for
Yes, sir.
this result of this, and there is nothing to report.
I believe there is. I believe that we're working on a fresh amendment. It'll be coming back as soon as it can. And I think we have, as long as there's no typographical error in there, we're gonna recommend to the committee acceptance.
I hope we have a quorum,
Okay.
the way we've been delaying all this.
All right. So I'd like to adjourn this meeting. Division 3 is now adjourned.
How much time do you think, Mr. Ripple?
I think no more than an hour. Yep, I understand.
I have to inform the rest of the Finance Committee that we'll meet in an hour or sooner, if there's enough of them here to pay attention. Are there any people out in the other room that we could inform?